There's this amazing new show called Briarpatch. It airs Thursdays at 10 on USA. It's about a woman who works for a little Senate subcommittee who comes home because her sister has been murdered in a car explosion. She walks off the plane in the pantsuit that is the most of everything. And that woman in the pantsuit is here, Rosario Dawson. Welcome.
Thank you. Ooh,
right.
I love this introduction.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, I have a lot to ask you
Yes.
about this show. It's wonderful. It's the tone is like dark and creepy and funny and like Twin Peaksy.
Yeah.
But first of all, not to be shallow, but what was it like when you first did your suit fittings? Because her pantsuits.
That's all Anna Lilia Mirpour, who directed the pilot. And I remember when I first met with her, she was just really very emphatic that her vision for Allegra Dill was like homage to Bianca Jagger. And, my character, as you said, works for the Senate subcommittee. She's been living in D.C. for a long time. And so she's definitely got her D.C. wardrobe. But I figured going back to her border town, Texas border town, to go and, kind of find out what happened with her sister's murder, that maybe she'd throw some jeans in her suitcase and she was like, oh no. And I'm like, a white suit though? You wear a white suit to go to your sister's funeral? I was like, white suit. And so I remember the very first shot that we did was that shot getting off of the plane. And it was the one thing that she actually took a long time with. And I remember the whole crew, everyone's looking at like, oh my God, is this how the whole shoot's going to go? Because she was just so emphatic about how this shot needed to be. But it's such a remarkable just expression of the coolness and the confidence and the poise of this character. And it really sets it up. And I cannot tell you how many times throughout the whole season having these pantsuits and, while she's in oftentimes men telling her who she is and what she's feeling and thinking about throughout the series, how great I felt for Allegra to be able to just stand there squared up and go, no, I can, let's go, let's tussle. And it was very, very powerful. It's a very powerful expression of a very, very sophisticated woman.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes you'll watch something and it's so important, that first introduction when you meet your protagonist, because it can be botched. And it is like, without a word, you kind of, so much about this woman.
Yeah.
Tell me about just the first, did you read like the first script when you signed on? Did you have a sit down with Andy or Sam Esmail, who's producing as well, who's wonderful?
Who I adore. Yeah, that was definitely having Sam on board, with so many questions, because I didn't have the whole 10 episodes to read. It was just sort of like an outline, as we were shooting this pilot. But you just know with Sam, there as a producer, that it was going to look great, that it was going to be shot really well, that it was going to be really smart. And so just gave me that confidence, and knowing that he was so supportive of Andy. And Andy's just remarkable. Used to be a TV critic, and, he has an insane encyclopedic knowledge of music. And
he worked on Legion, which is one of such a great show. It's such
incredible.
A visually interesting show also.
It's just like sitting there with Andy and just his excitement and exuberance about this. This is based off of a Ross Thomas novel. Yes. He's a huge fan of Ross Thomas, and he's always thought this particular book was ripe for an adaptation. And the original character is a male, and he changed it and modernized it and made it a border town. Like, he added the animals. There's a lot that he changed and transformed in this, and his vision for it was just really provocative. And I just have to say, for me, I interestingly didn't do as much research as I normally would. I still haven't read the book.
Oh, really?
Because I wanted to experience it in this form and not have so much busy in my head about what it was.
It's hard to imagine this character, and obviously things are different. Like you said, Andy changed some things, as a man, because she's such a woman. Like this, like everything about her, she's so kind of strong, and she's like working, you know how like women are always like working 10 different things at once in their minds, and they're like she's keeping track of a lot. She's essentially working 2 jobs. She's home like with people she grew up with who are like, your hair's flatter. I mean, there's a lot she's keeping track of. Like, I guess it doesn't feel, you know how sometimes there'll be like some show in Hollywood and it's like, oh, we're going to change the main character from a guy to a woman, and then the woman is essentially like a guy, and because they don't know how to write women. She's definitely a woman.
And I think that was another reason why I didn't want to read the book, because I didn't want to see what was dissimilar or similar and have too much of that character in my head, because that wasn't a character any longer in this at all. And the vision, I think, and the deliberateness of, you know, Andy's idea, I think, was just, you know, deserved and to be respected and to be grown from. And so it was nice to play a character so different than one that I've played before. You know, it wasn't like he made, you know, okay, this is going to be a woman, she's going to be crying all the time, and she's going to, you know, he didn't try to do these womanisms that I feel like sometimes get injected in, even from a male writer. He had a really remarkable and very diverse, you know, writer's room. So from people of color to women, just like really putting a lot of influence in it so that, you know, all the bases were covered and all the perspectives were really leaned on. And you could feel it, you know, you could feel it was very intentional, and it was just really, really smart and very thoughtful. And there's a lot of stuff that comes up from, you know, talking to all the different folks in the writer's room who had siblings or who grew up in a border town, or like every single person who was in that room had something very specific as to why they wanted to be a writer and what kind of stories they wanted to tell, and they really injected it into it. So there's you know, as much as it's pulp fiction, you know, it's film noir-y, it's gumshoe, it's you know,
Elmore
it's stuff that
Leonard-y,
it's, you know, it's Elmore Leonard-y, it's gumshoe. You have all these tropes and like sort of like energies that are in there that are familiar. There was also something very modern in its expression, and that came from just these really brilliant minds that came together to kind of to flesh it out.
Tell me what it was like. So like you said, it takes place in this little border town, which still like has a very cool hotel and
San
you know,
Bonifacio.
yes, exactly, and it's a great bar and like whatever. But what was it like filming in New Mexico, other than 105 degrees?
I mean, it was wonderful. It's beautiful there. I read somewhere that the Simpsons clouds are based on the clouds in New Mexico, and I absolutely believed it. You would look out at this gorgeous vista and be like, the Simpsons, like you would just see the clouds parting. It was just something.
So
it was kind of fun, but like, you know, and then we'd have these like weird, you know, filming delays because, you know, all of a sudden there'd be like a crazy lightning storm, which is totally normal. Like the weather there was like boiling hot, and then all of a sudden incredibly windy and cold, and just, you know, such a character, and, you know, and just something very natural, which I think was really great because it created an incredible bonding experience. Everybody who's there wants to be there. The crew who's there is really, really experienced. It's not, sometimes you go on location to film things and it's like, okay, we are here because of the, you know, tax incentives, and it's taking something actually from the production, and that's just not true. It's just like there's some of the most incredibly talented crew people who are there, but they just live there because they love it there. And you can just feel it. You know, it was a really amazing vibe. You know, Alan Cummings in it, and he was like, I've just never been on a set where people just clearly loved coming to work every day. And it was
Not
hard.
The Spice Girls movie? Spice World?
I mean, that's fun. You know what I mean? And we did Josie and the Pussycats together. So we've definitely, he and I have had fun, but there was just something really, really special. And what was cool was that vista and that energy was put into the show.
Was it your idea to cast Alan as the baddie?
You know, he's just, I don't know what it is. He says he loves me in real life, but for whatever reason, we keep working together and it gets tense.
Allegra works for a Senate subcommittee.
Yeah.
But it's like kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
How, like, do you happen to know, like, any senators that could have given you any input into, like, what exactly a Senate subcommittee is?
You know, it was really interesting, you know, when we were shooting the pilot in September 2018, you know, and one of the scenes, you know, one of the character asks, like, so what do you do? It's like, you know, so you work for a Senate subcommittee. Okay, so what does that mean? It's like anything they want it to mean. You know, and she's an investigator. And then a month later, I started dating my boyfriend, Senator Cory Booker, excuse me.
And you call him Senator Cory Booker?
No, of course not. I call him Cab, which is even weirder. But I remember doing ADR when the show got picked up because, we did the pilot. Didn't necessarily mean it was going to go.
Right. I've
had a feeling it being, Sam and everybody, that it could be greenlit, but you don't want to take these things for granted. Just, coming to do ADR and pulling Andy aside and going, I'm going to have something to tell you. And we were just laughing at just life imitating art in this case. And I have to say that the refreshing part of it was, as much as, it seemed there was a lot of similarities, the reality is it's definitely a much more cynical perspective of politics that are expressed in this show. I happen to be, not to say that every single senator or congressperson is like this, but I have to be dating Captain America. So he is just the exact opposite of that character and of that world, and just such a light. So it was nice, I think, for the psyche to know and not sort of descend into, which is very easy, especially these days, sort of the cynicism around politics, but to keep hope.
Yeah. So did he explain what a subcommittee is? I feel like I read the newspaper every day, and I don't really fully get it.
I've actually met with senators before and met a lot of their subcommittees before, so I kind of got into it. And that was actually one of the things that I remember being so impressed by is that, Cory is brilliant, but you can't do it all by yourself. And just to see how many people it takes to get things moving in DC, and I remember my first impression of it, first going down and meeting with a few senators
because you
decades
are an
ago.
activist in your own right.
Yeah, so starting Voto Latino in 2004, I've gotten to be I've been going to debates and stuff like that for a long time. This time around was definitely the first time I was blowing kisses at one of the candidates, but it was just really interesting to see just how much it takes to kind of move things along, and it's sort of like a brain extension.
Mm-hmm.
You've just got all these people who are helping you to cover all the bases, and so she's part of that, and you can see she's heavily relied on, and so it makes it really complicated because she's there to investigate her sister's murder, but she's also working.
Yeah.
And then seeing how people's reactions are to that. Like, oh, it's just like you to be mixing, something so morbid with work,
right.
And all of these different kind of assertions of her character from all of these other people, and seeing how she brushes it off, reacts to it. And she never felt the need to defend herself. She just was very solid in who she was and is. But also you can see, especially along the series, how much she's willing and needing to adapt and to evolve. Mm-hmm. And it was remarkable to grow with her over the series, over the show, and have that long to kind of delve into a character's mindset. And work is something that clearly has taken up her life and given her perspective and given her guidance and a goal and injuries, but it's for, I think, a lesson for all of us when we put all our eggs into one basket, that can be very dangerous. And she realizes, I think, and you see that very clearly even with her sister's passing, mm-hmm. She does not have a lot of love in her life. She does not have a lot of friends. She doesn't have a lot of the things that I think are quite healthy. And when she's sitting in her hotel alone drinking, you start to realize health is something that she needs to get more into.
So I shouldn't do that.
It's funny because that is one of the things that's very much prominent in the book. And my cousin's husband, probably he and his twin brother and Andy are probably the only people in America who've read every single one of Ross Thomas's books, and he's a really beloved favorite of a good group of people. And so he was like, okay, she's doing this show. I just need to know, does she drink a lot? He was just wanting to make sure that there were certain aspects of the character that had maintained. And I was like, oh, yeah. Yes, she does.
Yes, she does. Yes, she
He's
does.
like, okay, good. I want to watch it then. I'm like, all right, cool.
I have to just read you something on your IMDb bio because it's the weirdest description ever. And I wonder if you've ever read it. Rosario Dawson is stunning and resourceful. And I thought that was she is a stunning and resourceful actress. And I was just dying to know, like, first of all, who wrote that? Like,
I don't know.
why
There's
those
so
two
many weird things on my my Wikipedia. Like
Yes.
there's weird stuff on there. I don't know.
What's your take on that? Are you stunning? Yes, obvi.
Oh, thank you.
Resourceful. When was the last time you were resourceful?
I mean, I think all the time. I think that's a New Yorker thing, though. I think it's when you're having to create boundaries on a train with someone's armpit in your face, you really learn how to have a sense of self and to really read the situations around you. It was definitely one of those things that I was very fascinated by when I adopted my daughter, because she's from North Carolina. And I remember when I first brought her to New York when she was, she came to live with me when she was 11. And she'd never really seen homeless people before. And she'd just start walking up and talking to folks. And I just thought that was really beautiful. But then she started just doing things where she'd just like walk up next to someone and then turn her back. And I'm like, that guy's screaming into the air and kind of punching out, and maybe not someone you want to stand right next to and also turn your back to. Like, you don't have very good sense of self-preservation. And just like, sort of the innate things of teaching her, walk into a room, mind your exits, make sure when you're walking down the street, look people in the eye because they're less likely to come back around you and rob you if they think that you've seen them. Like, just like New York habit things that I had to dissect, that I hadn't realized that I'd processed over the years, but that in order to share with someone, like, how to, to just navigate spaces. And I think that resourcefulness, it's like growing up watching MacGyver. Like, I love that idea of like, no matter in the matter situation, you just figure it out. You don't walk in every situation and go, well, I don't know what to do and give up. You deliberate. And I love to solve puzzles. And I think it just very much comes from growing up here and just being around so many different cultures and people and energies and having to figure out how your place in it.
It's so funny that you tell your daughter to make eye contact with people. I have 2 daughters, and whenever we're on the train, I'm like, don't make eye contact with anyone.
No, see, that's different, though. Okay. On the train, that's not necessarily. But at the same time, it's like, then there's a humanity aspect,
Totally,
and like,
that's the dilemma.
I think there's such a necessity, especially like nowadays, people are like, I don't have cash to give homeless people, so I just don't look at them because I feel bad. And you're like, smile.
No, they're human
Acknowledge
beings.
them.
Yes.
Like, don't ignore them.
Or say, I'm sorry,
say I don't have it. And if they yell at you, then cool. And if they're most of the time they're going to be like, good. I've been literally the amount of people where I've been like, I'm so sorry, I don't have enough cash. Like, I have a food bar or something, or just I'll chat for you for a second, and they're like, thank you so much. Literally, no one has looked at me in 3 days.
No one acknowledges that.
And when I have people who will say like, oh, I don't give money to homeless people unless they seem like, I'm like, I don't want to give someone money who's a drug addict or an alcoholic. I'm like, you're gonna buy alcohol. You're a drug addict. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and if anybody needs a drink right now, maybe that person who's standing outside in the snow and can't get access to a shelter, maybe they could use that, So it's just like, you just got to have more humanity. And I think growing up again in New York, especially in a really low income neighborhood, I grew up in a squat in the Lower East Side, like the folks that don't normally get to be protagonists unless Jonathan Larson is writing them into Rent, the people who are, usually side notes or marginalized in some kind of way, those are my people. So I don't know if that's why I'm considered resourceful because I'm engaged, but it's in that same thing, like you said earlier, like, you're playing a strong woman. For me, that sounds redundant. Right, I've never known a woman not to be strong.
Like my women's college degree is like revoking my degree for even saying that. Of course, that's redundant.
And it's like, and sometimes that means being, and I think that's something that's being discovered now in a really beautiful way, that vulnerability and even those times of weakness is actually one of the strongest moments that you can have and courageous moments you can have. So even when I've played characters who are really down and out and really vulnerable and in tough places, I've still always considered them really strong.
You brought up Jonathan Larson and Rent. I interviewed Chris Columbus recently, and he said, yes, and he was like, the one movie I feel like people didn't get of mine was Rent. And of course you played Mimi. Yeah. Did you feel that way too?
I don't think so. I mean, I get so many people who, it's like a lot of projects that I've done, fortunately, unfortunately, I don't know, where people have discovered it later, and fallen in love with it. So, and I have so many, young girls or women who come up to me and say, I love your Mimi, and it inspired me to be Mimi in my high school or college play. And, then we're like the Mimis, and
Yes.
I didn't grow up with Shakespeare. And I know a lot of guys who can bond over Hamlet and women who can bond over Ophelia. I never had that, but I'm part of the Mimi crew. And I think that's really cool. And, taking my daughter to the live performance of Rent and having Daphne Rubin Vega there. And it's literally just passed on. And my daughter is an amazing singer and great with accents. And just, I run lines with her all the time. She's very good. I'm, training her, nudge, nudge. She could be a veterinarian. She could be all of it. She could be whatever she wants. But just she's got that real curly hair. I had to curl my hair.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would just be, it's an amazing character to play. And it's interesting because, we're in that place of going, well, she's a stripper, she's this and that, but it's she's a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a teenager and she's HIV positive and she's alone and she's a squatter, and she's got a lot of chosen family around her, and she's trying to figure it out. And I've played a lot of characters like that. I have people who are like, oh, I love He Got Game, but why Lala gotta do Jesus Shuttlesworth like that? I'm like, he cheated on her too.
Right.
Why do we keep forgetting that these are just young people making mistakes? And the first project I ever did, Kids, was really about that. Latchkey kids like myself growing up and what happens when your parents aren't supervising everything and you don't have a community of people really raising you as a village. And that when your villagers are maybe not the most, quote unquote, savory characters, but you can still learn quite a lot. And if you make it through that moment, because a lot of people don't, but if you make it through that moment, that resilience and resourcefulness will be such a huge advantage to you than people who maybe didn't ever have any trauma or challenges growing up.
Absolutely. Rosario Dawson, I adore you.
Oh, I adore you too.
This show is so good. Briarpatch, it airs Thursdays at 10 on USA. It's great. Thank you for putting up with all my questions about your boyfriend, which I always feel bad about asking a woman about. You shouldn't have to answer about your boyfriend. I imagine you get asked, who gets asked more? Does he get asked more about you, or do you get asked more about him?
I think definitely I get asked more.
Okay.
He thinks he gets asked more, but people have their more pressing questions to ask him, like what's going on with this impeachment or whatever, which is understandable.
We got nothing. Well, Mike, I'll talk about TV.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure.